other things are you doing? How are you seeing learning retention progress within your organizations? I'd love to hear more. So, Amanda, I see your hand.
Well, this is more about a tool that I see used with some canned content that we facilitate from Franklin Covey,
Okay.
that they have ongoing applications that have been built that push out notifications on individuals' devices, where it's either a bite for a day or it's a bite for a week, where it's asking them to kind of look at what it is that they've learned. I'd have to find my phone and I'll put it in the chat once I do, but there is, I believe it's like an open source app that items can be built upon, and then you load it in that app where it can do something similar as their content has done. It's called Mind Maker is one of the ones that one of their contents use, and you have to put a code in, and I'm assuming that they're a reciprocity for other ones that are similar to this. But if you were to build something that then pushes out reminders in a pre-built content that is associated with the training that you've done, it could definitely be helpful.
I love that. Yeah, a bite a day, a bite a week, something small, right? And I think when we first try our hand at learning reinforcement from a drip feeding perspective, our tendency as L&D people still gets in our way because we're still in the mindset of trying to teach somebody something. And really what we want to do is we want to remind them of something. That's what learning reinforcement is, right? We want to again create that trigger that makes them think about what they've learned. We don't want to get all, oh, here's the history of time in a big old long email. That's not the direction that we need to go in. But bless our hearts, that's our natural tendency. And we throw so much into a learning reinforcement email or what video or whatever it is that we're using that it gets lost. And so I love the idea of having those bites.
There's been a mindset shift that I've done as I've gotten more into the coaching content, in which I've really started looking at our role as reinforcers as more of coaches. What are coaching questions you could ask? Well,
Yes.
if you haven't used it so far, what's going to be the consequence of not changing? Or reflective questions, just prompts to get them thinking and using and reflecting. Because once they find something that works for them, great. If they don't, okay. But it's really not our place to really teach after the fact. It's more
Right.
of a coaching capacity than a teaching capacity.
It's connecting the dots, right? It's helping people connect the dots from lessons to learning to action. And I appreciate that you brought that up, Amanda, about questions. I think one of our superpowers as L&D people is the ability to tease out questions and knowledge from people. And if we could hone that skill a little bit more, a lot of times at the end of a learning program, we'll say something to the effect of, are there any additional questions? Do you have any questions about this topic? Where do you feel lost? Right. So we ask questions like that. And maybe if we flip the script on those sorts of questions and ask them, which of the topics today is the one that you're going to put into action tomorrow? Right. So if we flip the script on questioning and then roll that into follow-up emails or what have you, then I think that we'll see more power in that. I remember here's an old school technique for you. Now that I just talked about questioning, popped into my head. I used to run a leadership university for an organization that I worked for. And what I would have people do is at the end of our time together, I would have them take two key ideas, two key actions that they wanted to put into place immediately upon leaving. I had them put that on a 3x5 card. I would put that into an envelope and I would mail it to them, old school snail mail it to them. So that way they got it maybe a week or a week and a half later, whatever. And then they opened it up and they were able to see that. And I would hope that that would trigger something to say, oh yeah, all of that stuff, like Amanda said, it's sitting on the shelf now and it's got dust on it or it's still thrown in the back of my car. Hopefully they pull that out and they're able to use that. And I think that's the same sort of nudges that we need to be using, right? And Chester, oh, I love that idea. Perhaps a packet for managers to coach their employees afterwards. I love that idea. Would you like to come off mic and talk a little bit more about that idea?
Sure. I guess I don't have too much to say about it, but I saw a webinar a few months back with a consultant that was doing something along this line. And the packets were structured. So they had a process that they would teach their managers for how to coach. basically like creating a culture of coaching in their organization. But so all the managers were kind of trained to follow this like 4-step coaching process, and it was spaced. So the first type of interaction would happen shortly after this class. The second interaction would be some type of discussion about how they were going to apply whatever it was. And they would actually have a project that they would have to do, or they would go implement it. And so their next conversation would be about how did that implementation go? And then in between all of that, there was, just in time coaching and at the end performance coaching. So it was really kind of helping the managers with, help with that retention process.
I love that idea. And that's a forest through the trees idea for me. I don't know about for the rest of you. That's something I hadn't thought about doing. I often try to communicate to managers and bring them into the conversation earlier, as I said, activating them earlier. But I love the idea of putting together just something really simple for them. Here's a tool, here's a checklist, here's a rubric, here are some question prompts that you can ask people after they come back from a training session. Because again, we assume that the managers know what to do, that they know what to ask, they know how to support. That might necessarily be true. So a tool like this would be awesome. I love that idea, Chester. Thank you for sharing that.
I think it's more effective if you're in an organization that either already values coaching or is trying to create that culture where you're actively trying to help managers in your organization be better coaches. If that's not really at the top of your mind, maybe I think something like this would probably just seem like, a PDF file that you're randomly sending managers, right?
Right, because I think it's baby steps. Maybe you don't have a culture of coaching. How do you get there? Well, you just don't throw a big, large packet on people's desks, right? You've got to do baby steps. So what's the next logical step? And once we get everybody on board with that, what's the next logical step after that? And so on and so on. And I think if you have a plan, like you said, if you have a plan, then it becomes easier for people to manage, and it becomes easier for managers to then process. So I love that idea. I think that's a great one.
It kind of has a two purposes to it, I guess. One is helping the employees to retain and improve whatever the skill they were learning in the training. And two is scaffolding, or it's actually giving managers a mental model of how to coach.
Right. It is about scaffolding. And I think everything we do is about scaffolding. How can we support to get to the next phase, right?